I will be your opening MC here. My name is Todd and I'm Vice President of Product and Developer Relations at Progress. So before we hand it off to our real keynote speaker this morning, we did want to share a few thoughts on both why we're putting on this event as Progress and really how we as a developer community continue to change and how that change has impacted us, especially in the space of mobile app development and doing mobile app development with JavaScript. So this notion of the evolution of the JavaScript mobile developer. And as I started to think about, what does that really mean? Why are we talking about the evolution of the JavaScript mobile developer? I realized first we need to establish how did we become JavaScript mobile developers in the first place? We didn't start that way, so how did we get here? And I think the best place to start is to go all the way back in our time capsules to 2007. In 2007, as some of you may remember, it was a great time. If you were a JavaScript developer, you were high-fiving, you were blanking out projectors, you were sitting at your desk working on web projects. You were generally happy. I don't know if we had beards like this in 2007. That may have come later. But if you remember 2007, the things that we were working on, the hot stuff was Ajax. Ajax was only a couple of years old as a term. It was about 8 or 9 years old as a technology. But Ajax was the thing that if you were cool, you were doing Ajax. jQuery was still pretty fresh. It was a young kid at the time. We had IE7. Microsoft had finally shipped a new browser after IE6, and wow, we had new things. So yeah, it was challenging perhaps to keep up with browsers and the differences in browsers. The projector's just going to do what it is going to do, so I'm going to let it ride. But our lives were pretty simple in this time period. So as a JavaScript developer, we were web developers. We were JavaScript web developers, and this is our simple world. We had a box, we played in it, and we made stuff for the web. Then this happened. This was at the end of 2007. A guy got up on stage, some guy named Steve Jobs. He held up this little device with a glowing screen and started the journey which has brought us to today, started to make our lives more complex. If you don't remember, before that event, this was sort of the state of mobile internet. I was working at a big company at the time and also doing a little startup. We didn't call them startups then. We just called them working in your car at lunch. And I thought it would be really cool when I was doing the startup if I had a phone with the internet. And so I got one kind of like this, one of these BlackBerries. And I remember being on a road trip, browsing the internet with my thumb and a thumb wheel as I clicked through various links. And that seemed like the coolest thing. Well, naturally, the iPhone sort of threw all that away. But what a lot of us had forgotten is that when the iPhone first arrived, we didn't have mobile web. What was promoted was the idea of zooming into pages. So the iPhone took your viewport, zoomed it out, and then as users, we just kept double tapping to zoom in on what we wanted, double tap to zoom out. So even though the iPhone came in 2007, it didn't really radically change our lives. We were still web developers building for the web, and the iPhone just adapted to us. We hadn't had to make a lot of behavior changes yet. So keep going, 2008. What happened there? Now our lives start to get a little more complicated. The App Store arrived. And the App Store finally introduced the notion of apps that could be made by anybody that could now run on these devices, which are starting to show up in more and more of our users' hands. So with the advent of apps in the App Store, now we had a slightly more challenging problem to deal with. How were we as JavaScript developers, web developers, going to adapt to this new world? Well, as many of you know, there is a law that was a law. It was coined conveniently the year before the App Stores, this Atwoods Law, that suggests that any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. So naturally, the JavaScript community obliged. Shortly after the launch of the App Store, we had the arrival of PhoneGap, nay Cordova, or however you do the naming thing. But PhoneGap came. Within 4 or 5 months of apps, we had PhoneGap. So JavaScript developers rushed in to fill that gap, to help us get things done that the browsers couldn't do by giving us access to device APIs. Not long after that, we started to tackle the UI problem with JavaScript, and we had jQuery UI, and jQuery UI became prolific as the way we tried to kind of emulate app UI in a mobile device. In fact, we have people who worked on jQuery UI. TJ's got some sessions. He can probably share great stories of that time and making this look perfect on every device, including Windows Phone. So even though we started to tackle some of these problems, we brought JavaScript out into the apps. We had ways of making our apps look kind of like mobile apps with JavaScript in the web. There were still a lot of new challenges building mobile apps that as web developers, JavaScript developers, we couldn't really tackle easily. Debugging was a lot harder. Building apps now for iOS, building for Android, both of those actually arrived in the same year, so the problems came together. That was harder. User expectations were going up with these apps. So we had started to tackle, but there were still a lot of problems with building for mobile as a JavaScript developer. In our own history, so at Telerik and then Progress, we started to try to help developers tackle these problems too. Some of you may have been with us on this journey using some of these products, things like Kenda UI, but not just Kenda UI for mobile, which if you were around at the time had a super cool feature, automatically adapting the UI across iOS and Android, changing to the paradigms of the platform without you doing a thing. Well, that kind of faded with time, but nonetheless, we are coming up with new ways, new solutions to try to make all these other surrounding problems of mobile app development easier. Icenium was giving you builds in the cloud, so you didn't have to set up build environments, companion apps to preview your apps on your physical device more easily, starting to tackle more and more of the challenges so that we as JavaScript developers could be successful building mobile apps. So our world had gotten a little bit bigger, but we'd now simplified it a bit more. We tackled web, we tackled mobile, but we were still using web technologies to really solve the whole problem. And this was good. In fact, we really liked this. We spent a lot of time pushing on this, but our customers were still having a lot of challenges. We were still getting a lot of people who, despite their best efforts, were coming to us with performance challenges in their apps. Often they're hybrid apps they're building with Icenium or Telerik platform. They couldn't quite get that native look and feel that their users expected. They got close. That uncanny valley of not being perfect was really starting to get under the skin of a lot of the people that we worked with. So our engineering team said there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something we can do that still leverages this skill set of JavaScript, but lets people eliminate the problems that they're still facing. So research started around 2013, and actually the research started in multiple places around the same time. Facebook started doing some research at this time, so did Telerik and Progress, looking for ways we could combine these benefits. The benefits of web, the reach and the reuse of your skills, and the benefits of native, the richness and the full access to a device. So fast forward a few years of research and engineering and prototyping and betas, we arrive at 2015 with the introduction, PowerPoint, of both React Native and NativeScript. And that really began to bring us full circle. We started to have the ability to tap into the complete richness of native devices. There was no limits to what we could do while still using our web skills. So even up to now, and including the bleeding edge of working with AR and VR, which this is the most practical application I've ever seen. I just do this all day, scan things, I toss them around the room. That was neat. And then I put my phone down. Customers are now able to build very high quality, high fidelity, immersive experiences, the kinds of apps that are consumer grade as we've come to understand it, while still using those web skills that they've grown and developed. And over time, React Native and NativeScript have really kind of become these two horses in this how do you build native with JavaScript race. And if you look at the NPM downloads for both of these, for the CLI over the months, you can see it's relatively equal. Now, I'm not suggesting NativeScript and React Native are exact peers, but what I think we've come to understand, especially as we've worked a lot with the Angular team at Google and now even the React Native team at Facebook, that there really is a simple choice, and we can all kind of play in the sandbox together. If you're a React developer using React, you're going to build these apps with React Native. If you're an Angular developer, a Vue developer, NativeScript is going to be your option for taking your skills and delivering these native apps. So we've kind of reached this happy equilibrium. And as a brief update for you on NativeScript, because I know a lot of you here today have come to this event for NativeScript updates and NativeScript Developer Day, I wanted to share a few quick updates on that front. NativeScript continues to grow very well. We continue to see the community expand, especially people building apps for businesses and for partners. So we've now seen over 3.3 million downloads of NativeScript. And even just this year, it's a 2x increase over what we saw last year. We thought last year was pretty good. So things are going well for NativeScript. If you've not seen the new NativeScript website, I would encourage you to check it out. If you're a fan of beautiful websites, this is a beautiful website. And I'm not just saying that because we helped create it, but it is a pretty neat website, and you can check it out, share it with your friends. And I want to thank you as the community. A lot of you in this room are in the NativeScript community, and you continue to play a key role in what drives NativeScript forward. There are now over 500 NativeScript-specific plugins, in addition to all the NPM and CocoaPods and everything else that NativeScript can tap into. And 90% of those were created by you. They weren't created by Progress. They weren't created by our engineering teams. They were created by you. And 14 of the top 20 plugins were also created by the community, not created by the NativeScript core team. So that's a huge amount of value you've added to NativeScript, And we really appreciate that, and we hope you can continue to do that and help make this community great. In addition to all the other things you're doing, helping us in the communities, in the Slack channels, and making pull requests to the open source projects. And if PowerPoint agrees with me, I'd like to also share with you that I'm pretty excited that next week we will be shipping NativeScript 5.0, which is another huge step forward for NativeScript. And I'm not just saying that as a hyperbole. This is a big step forward for the framework. And a lot of the engineers from NativeScript are here. And I think they would agree that this is one of the best releases of NativeScript so far. A lot of neat stuff happening. 3 big things I'll highlight for you here briefly this morning. We're introducing what I'm calling a new instant start CLI workflow for NativeScript. Borrowing on some of the best things that you've all told us you love about NativeScript Playground, we want to bring that to your daily workflow using the CLI. Help people get started faster on their machines. We're also introducing HotModule Replacement, which a lot of you have asked for, and we're enhancing our code sharing story between web and mobile apps, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So instant start CLI workflow, if you're not familiar with this, the basic idea is that now, if you're a brand new NativeScript developer, install from npm, and without all the time and potential dead ends of installing all the iOS SDKs and Android SDKs, you can, from your CLI, run a simple command and get a QR code right there in context without leaving the CLI, scan it with a companion app, and see the changes you're making in your local coding environment, in VS Code, right there on the companion device. So this dramatically simplifies the startup and getting started time for a new NativeScript developer, and we think it's a pretty cool enhancement to the overall workflow. So you should check that out. TNS preview is the new command you're going to want to use. And there's that giant QR code in the CLI. HotModule Replacement, a lot of you are familiar with the concept. We didn't invent the concept, but a lot of you have been asking for the benefits. So this is the ability to change things in your app, including the JavaScript, and instantly in place update the app without waiting on any kind of app reload or refresh that loses context or state. So this makes it a lot faster to debug and create amazing apps using NativeScript. It makes your overall developer experience a lot better as well. So we think you're going to like that. So we've solved now web and mobile. And on the mobile side, we're a lot closer to using native technologies while still leveraging our JavaScript skills. So then what's next in some ways? Well, NativeScript has solved a lot of the problems. It's kind of taken us on this pendulum or this scale of no reuse on one side, basically doing everything bespoke every time you target a new platform or a new operating system. That's one end. And on the other end of the scale, you have full reuse, which I have the kind of unicorn poop emojis here because I think full reuse, we all know, is sort of mythical and also often terrible if it's done just slightly wrong. So you want to be somewhere on this pendulum. And NativeScript has for a long time kind of helped you now with the team reuse and skill reuse. It's helped you take skills you already have, people you already have, and build more things. But we think there is a way to move a little bit further down this scale without getting into the unicorn poop space and create code sharing that can actually be useful to you as developers. And so we've been doing a lot of work with the code sharing concept over the last year and a half with the Angular team. And Sebastian here is our expert on this story if you want to talk to him about how all of this works. I stole his chart here. But the idea is that there's a lot of things we can reasonably share between a web project and a mobile project, especially if we're using frameworks like Angular or like Vue. And we want to embrace that in the tooling, embrace that in our templates so that you can build web and mobile apps, these apps that go everywhere, where your users go without being redundant. There's some great examples in our showcase. Portable North Pole is an app you should all download, built with NativeScript. Not using the Angular schematics that I described here, but is doing web and mobile code sharing between their web apps and their mobile apps. And it's an amazing app for your kids, so check it out. I know this is crunch time for the app, so let's help them get a little bit of load testing in here before the holidays hit. So our worlds are now overlapping. We're going from just sitting side by side using our skills. We're actually now starting to blend our worlds back together. We're able to build for web and mobile. It's 2018. It's been 11 years. We're doing what's right for all the platforms, reusing our skills, starting to share some code. And in many ways, we're almost back to this. We're almost back to happy guy in the chair with the beard, with the sticky note on our head, feeling good about our life and what we can build. So the only thing that's left then is to say, where do we go now? We've come this far in 11 years. What's sort of next after all of this? And while I've talked a lot about solving the challenges of building apps in the high level, there are still a lot of hard problems that go deeper that aren't as easily solved. How do you handle offline? Data sync when your apps go on and offline. Scalable services. I mean, of course, there's the cloud and there's functions as a service, but do you know how to do that? Does it feel easy? I know I don't qualify as a developer anymore, but it doesn't feel easy to me. There's still a lot of things that we think should be easier for us as JavaScript developers. So we think that you really need to adopt a holistic approach to your apps. Think of your apps as sort of all the places your users interact with you and all the things it takes to make those apps successful. Not just the front end, but the entire stack, the front end, the back end, everything that goes into it. Part of the way we're addressing that progress is through ProgressConvey. And so if you're not familiar with it, I will make a plug here for you to check it out. It gives you a lot of the solutions you need to go beyond just building the apps like you might with NativeScript, and gives you the kinds of other tools you need to handle offline, to handle data integrations, or even handle chat and conversational UI, which is now becoming increasingly common with all the home assistants and chatbots that are popping up. So think about all of the surface area of your app. Think about how you acquire the tools to leverage the skills you already have to be successful going forward. And there are big shifts continuing to come. We've seen a lot up till now. We took a very small look at some up till this very moment, but we see things like smarter apps, AI, and the whole machine learning and vision APIs, all this stuff. It's still very experimental for a lot of us. There are some cool applications, but increasingly it will be table stakes. So how are you applying this into your apps to make your apps better? AR and VR are pretty much toys in all the cases I've seen, but there are legitimate industrial cases for this. So how are you preparing for those cases, perhaps in your industry or in the companies you work, to make sure you can adopt that without requiring a whole new skill set to be successful? So if we know anything, we know that this law has proven to be true more times than not. Things that can be written in JavaScript will be. We've seen it time and time again over the last 11 years. There are more changes yet to come, and I have faith that this law will continue to hold into that next era of apps. So I'll leave you with this and just say that I think you need to be prepared and be ready for the future. Those changes are coming, and I think this room would largely agree. I don't think I have to hard sell you on this, but bet on JavaScript, or really bet on JavaScript again. It's been good to us so far. It's a very flexible and adaptable technology, and I think everything we see coming in the future will be addressed by this as well. So that's what I've got for you this morning. Thank you very much.